Hey, Liz.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Do you want to make me a co-host again?
Yeah, let's do it.
I don't know. You might want to stop the recording now also.
Oh
And
gosh, yeah. How about that?
For those of you who are just joining, welcome. Why don't we put I think we've all been on panels for the last day, and some of us met on Tuesday as well. But for those of us who are coming in new as well to this conversation, maybe we can sort of say good morning in the chat and share your title, where you're coming from, or anything else you'd like to say hello and good morning. And we'll kick off in maybe another minute or so. Morning, Bonnie. Hi, Bruna. Good morning, Jen from Edinburgh. Awesome. Hi, Rebecca. Lots of rain everywhere, which is a good thing, including in Kigali, we just learned. So rain in the US, rain in East Africa. Great. All right, everyone. Well, welcome. We're going to go and get started. My name is Roshan Paul. I'm the director of the leadership practice at IREX, which is the part of IREX that's hosting the Impact Fellowship Summit. And prior to that, I've been in the world of fellowships for most of my career. And so I'm excited to be joined here on this panel for People First, along with a wonderful and distinguished group of folks. And before I turn it over to them, I want to say a couple of things about the People First community, which I'm sure many of you know, but just to bring us all to the same page, the People First community is a cross-sectoral community of practitioners, donors, academics, and both public and private sector actors with a shared belief in the importance of prioritizing investments in the agency and leadership development of people as a pathway to sustainable development. Systems are, of course, made up of people, right? We sometimes forget that in all the talk about ecosystems and systems change, but systems are also made up of us, of people. And at People First, the belief is that the best path for reaching a more equitable and sustainable world is through investing in the leadership development of collective, diverse, locally rooted leadership. People working at all levels of a system, whether in health, education, agriculture, etc., to achieve a shared purpose, right? And I think that is something that resonates quite a lot with us at IREX as well, because our tagline is we invest in people. We don't build bridges or wells or put vaccines in people's arms. I mean, those are all vitally important things, but our mission and our focus is really going from a lens of being people first. And so we are excited to have this conversation with all of you about the importance of putting people first. And I fortunately do not have to say very much today. I'm going to turn it over to our wonderful panel who are going to tell us about how they're putting people first in their work. So maybe we'll do quick introductions and kick off from there. So to the panel, I'd love you to introduce your name, title, what organization you represent, including how long that organization has been around, and perhaps a one-sentence description of the mission of the organization. And we'll do a quick kind of rapid-fire intro round and then go from there. So why don't we start with you, Caren?
Thank you, Roshan. Hi, everybody. Lovely to be here. My name is Caren Wakoli. I am the Interim Executive Director of Emerging Public Leaders, an organization based in the US, but operates in Ghana, Liberia, and Kenya, and works with young people in public service and for public service. And I'm also the Executive Director of Emerging Leaders Foundation, based in Kenya, and we do values-based leadership development for young people. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Great. Thanks, Caren. Anne-Marie.
Thanks so much, Roshan. Hello, Anne-Marie Burgoyne. I'm the Managing Director of Philanthropy at Emerson Collective, which is an organization that focuses on social change in Palo Alto, California. I lead our philanthropic team, but we also have teams that focus on creativity, on storytelling, on investing. And our goal has been to have a multi-lever organization that allows us to move towards social change in systemic ways. I'm really glad to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. Azad.
Hi, everyone. What a throwback to be doing a web panel. It feels like it's been a year since I've done one of these, but it's really lovely to be reminded of the power of this, to have people from all over the world join in a setting that would not be possible prior to all this technology. But I lead an organization called Global School Leaders. I'm based out of Los Angeles in California, but we work we're a network of organizations spread across Asia, Latin America, and Africa. So we work in 8 countries on developing and supporting school leaders. So very much are looking at leadership as a means of unlocking potential within the education system. So we work with formal school heads and their leadership teams to support them in delivering better quality education.
Thanks, Azad. And finally, Shema.
Hello, everyone. I'm excited to be here. My name is Rene Shema. I go by Shema. I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships and the Rwanda Country Director for Global Health Co., a leadership accelerator organization that develops the next generation of highly resourced and networked leaders in the movement for health equity. We work mostly in Southern Africa, in Rwanda, Uganda, Malawi, Zambia, but really recruiting our fellows in those 4 countries and in 9 other countries from West Africa, East Africa, and Southern Africa. Yeah, and we've been in the service for 14 years now. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you all and welcome again. We're going to kick off with an icebreaker question that I'm going to ask the panel, and maybe we'll go in the reverse order. So starting with Shema and then going from Azad to Anne-Marie to Caren. And I also invite everyone to share their response to this question in the chat as well, if you feel comfortable. And so the question is going to be to the panel, but then everyone can share in the chat as well. And the question is, you are all leaders in your own right. What's a personal experience you've had that convinced you of the value of centering people first? Right? So you're all leaders. So what's a personal experience you had that made you convinced about the importance of centering people first? So when we kick it off with you, Shema, and then we'll go in reverse order. And everyone feel free to share your experiences in the chat as well.
Yes, I think I would have many experiences to share, but the one that comes quickly to mind is that when I entered the global health space 18 years ago, specifically in 2005, I joined an organization that was purely mission-driven. By that time, I was really confronted with a lot of gaps. I was interested to lead the programs or some functions, the organization such as human resources. And I was told to do what was right. But guess what? I didn't have the resources to learn how to do my work effectively. There were no clear guidelines. Mentorship was scarce, and I really didn't have a solid network to share best practices with. So same as my young colleagues at that time, we were doing everything by trial and error. But I also remember that even 5 minutes of mentorship I was getting from here and there made a difference to the program and to the retention of doctors and nurses I was working with. So years later, when I heard of a newly founded organization that wanted to recruit extremely bright young people, train them, put resources at their disposal, offer them the state-of-the-art mentorship opportunities, and really support them in building a network that would allow them to learn from each other, I found it as an opportunity I couldn't miss, for I was convinced that that generation was going to fix the health systems much better and much quicker if actually the people of my background supported it. And that's how I literally ended up in Global Health Core 12 years ago.
Should I go, Roshan? Okay,
Yeah,
perfect.
thank you, Shema. Go ahead, Azad. Yeah.
Okay. So I was actually thinking back to early in my career when fellowships were a much bigger part of my life than they are now. But when in the mid-90s, when I finished college, I did a program, an AmeriCorps program that's now called the Bill Emerson Hunger Fellows Program. And this was a fellowship program that was focused on domestic anti-hunger issues in the US. And I was a young college graduate, and I was sent to a town called Truckee, California, which now is, I think, much bigger than it was then. Then it was a town of maybe 10, 15,000 people. And we were given a telephone line and said, like, okay, now your job is to set up an emergency food distribution program in this town. And, one of the things we did was we brought together the faith leaders in the town to say, there's hunger is a problem in your town, and we need to work together to fix it. And we ran very rapidly into a lot of theological differences between the leaders. And but as we worked through them, we realized that it was so important to get leadership involved. All the ingredients were there to create this in the town, and it just needed the leadership to step forward and say, we need to make this a priority and we need to solve this. So that was a very influential moment in my journey in terms of seeing the potential of leaders to unlock change. And of course, being a part of this group of 20 people who to this day remain quite close in our, because we went through this formative experience together. And even though I don't know that many of us work directly on hunger issues, almost all of us remain in the social change space. And that's also been a huge part of my life in terms of the way being a part of such a program influenced me in seeing the potential for people to make change. So I'll stop there and pass along to Anne-Marie.
Thank you, Azad. That was a beautiful story. And I live moderately nearby Truckee, and so was able to visualize that. I appreciated that. I was thinking back about 20 years in my career. Early in my career, I had been more of a business person. I was an investment banker. I'd been part of a team at a company that had done an initial public offering, but I knew I wanted to move into the social sector, which was a harder transition than I had thought. And I had the opportunity to be a REDIF fellow. And REDIF is an organization that uses social enterprise as a vehicle for creating social change and also for doing workforce development with traditionally hard to employ communities. And the organization I worked in specifically worked with adults with developmental disabilities. And we ran a number of businesses, and then we also had a fairly large placement program. And so my role was to run the businesses and take on the placement work. And I had no knowledge of any of those things. All I knew how to do was build spreadsheets and build budgets. And Redif had a very strong program to scaffold people into these roles. There was a community of practice of other people that were learning to take their business skills and move into these new sorts of roles. We had a mentor, and that mentor met with me every week for an entire year. The leaders of the organizations for whom we worked were given training to help to scaffold us for success. And as Azad mentioned, I was also part of a cohort. And most people in that cohort I'm still quite close to today. They've stayed in the social change sector. And I felt like that investment in me both allowed me to, I think, do very good work in the disabilities community. I stayed for long after my fellowship in that community. And then today have brought those skills, and mostly those transitional skills, what it means to come from one sector and then try to work across sectors into the rest of my work career. So I'm a huge fan of fellowships and core models, or models that help people to really build themselves into an infrastructure of social change with others. So I'm going to pass it along to Caren, but I appreciated getting to share the story. It was nice to remember back to it.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Wow, so I have this story of something that happened when COVID hit. Emerging Leaders Foundation has been in existence for the last 11 years, and we work with young change makers in communities, in politics, in learning institutions, and we have a team of young people, most of who are alumni of our program. And so when COVID hit, suddenly we decided we needed to work from home, but we were not ready to work from home. And we put in place mechanisms to try and see, okay, so how do we ensure the team is engaged, everybody's involved, and we are still sort of delivering our vision as an institution. And as the team leader, I made certain decisions. Of course, I knew what was happening. We were reading the news and observing what's happening elsewhere in the world. But one time, one of my colleagues came to me and said, Caren, have you had one-on-ones with any of the team members to know what's happening and how people are coping? Because I can assure you there's a problem. I said, no, I haven't. Should I? And he said, yes. And I said, okay, let me start with you. What's happening in your life at this point? He explained to me, and I thought, okay, let me make time and have meetings with individual team members and get to know what's happening. How are people coping? Where are they thriving? Where are the points of struggle and all that? And those conversations taught me such a big thing about needing to sit down to listen to the leaders I was serving with, get to know what's happening, and collectively make a decision on how we needed to navigate the situation to still continue to be relevant and to offer what our mandate is. And from that, we introduced something called the shadow CEO, because then I discovered, oh my goodness, I actually do not have the answers. And it doesn't mean that the person at the top of the institution has all the answers. No, in fact, sometimes, a lot of times it's the opposite. It's the people that have the answers. And so we decided that every 2 weeks we have one of the team members being the shadow CEO. They make decisions, they lead the team. And at the end of the 2 weeks, they share a report about what worked, what didn't work, observations, what we need to change as an institution, and then pass on to somebody else. That culture has transformed our organization big time. One final story I wish to share is in February, I went to Ghana to meet our teams in Liberia, Ghana, Kenya, to talk about our work as emerging public leaders. And it was interesting. Time came when we were talking about success stories. What are some of the success stories we've had so far in the work we've been doing? And the team talked and talked and talked. And one team member from Liberia shared a story about how the Army had reached out to our team in Liberia to say, we want this program, bring this fellowship to the Army, because we have young people in the Army and we need what these people are learning. And I said, so how come you didn't share this in the monthly report. And they said, you guys never asked. We didn't think this was an important part of the sort of impact or success story to share. So these two stories just taught me something so critical. When you put people at the center of everything you do, you get to learn so much. And when it comes to programming, for instance, you need to program with the people you're working with or who the program is going to reach at the center. In fact, they should lead the process because they have the lived experiences, they are the experts in their own lives, and they have the solutions. And so when we learn to listen, sit back, and just respect everybody's opinion on an equal basis, oh my goodness, it makes a whole lot of a difference, putting people at the center. Thank you.
Wonderful, great stories, Caren and everyone else. One thing I noticed is also the importance of cohorts and teams in those stories. And so it's not just like our own stories, but our stories in community with others as well. That's so important. So now that we've gotten to know our panelists on a deeper and more personal level, let's dive into some more of the more like traditional panel questions. And the first one is, you know, in your work, what do you see as one of the greatest challenges or obstacles to implementing a people-first approach on a broader scale in development, right? So it could be traditional ideas about what leadership is, could be funding challenges, or more traditional ways of measuring impact, silos, you know, whatever it might be. What have been, in your case, like the big challenges that you faced when it comes to implementing like a people-first approach? And we'll just make it kind of popcorn style this time. So whoever wants to start can start, and we'll go from there.
I'd be happy to kick us off since it seems like it would be coming my way in the way you were staggering it. But I think about a couple of different things. I think one is the time scale of change when you involve local leaders. And I think the other is sort of the challenges in measuring your impact, right? So in terms of the time scale, what I would say is that as a network, we chose not to sort of create our own institutions in each of the countries we're working in, but rather to invest in local leadership, local organizations who then become a part of a global network that's focused on strengthening school leadership. And I think the challenge that happens then is that it takes a while to negotiate partnerships. Partnerships are fickle. Some days they're great, some days they're terrible. And you have to work through these things, and it takes a while for trust to develop among people, and these are all very natural human things. But yet we operate on timescales that are driven by the grants that we get to do the work that we do, which are oftentimes on a totally different time scale. It may be so we're a 7-year-old organization. So far we've dealt in grants between 1 to 3 years, which is definitely not the time scale on which we think about change, right? So I think the one challenge that we face is this time scale challenge. I think the other question that we grapple with a lot, particularly as we think about leadership, is how do you measure the impact of your work? So I'll just use an example of our work with school leaders to illustrate the point, where school leaders get transferred a lot, particularly in government systems. So when we are training and supporting school leaders, we are obviously investing in that person. But I guess when we think about measuring our impact, we both have to measure the impact in the institution where the person is when they receive the training. But then over time, you have to think about when the person, like, are you measuring your impact by when the person gets transferred? Do they take the practices that you train them on in school A to school B? And is that how you're measuring your success? Because then you're centering the person, or are you centering your impact on, the results that they generate in their schools, and how do they outlast the person leaving that institution as well? So these are some of the challenges that we grapple with as we think about this issue.
I can go next and talk about thank you, Shema. I can go next and talk about the fact that change takes time. I sense urgency in terms of the fact that we need systems to change. We need a more just and fair world. We need a more equal society. We need people living dignified lives, and it is possible. But it's taking time, and change takes time. It's a process. It's my goodness, it's painful. It's painfully long. And what I'm learning is to be patient while still acting in the urgency of the moment, to see what can we do, what part of the system can we change, and also just knowing that we are not alone in the ecosystem. There are all these players playing their part, doing what they know how to do best to make a difference, and so that our collective efforts coming together makes then the change. But change takes time. It's a process. It takes long. That is one big challenge. Number two is about silo mentality, competition, because all these entities are playing their part. But when you have institutions led by individuals either who are not secure or who do not see the value for partnership, then institutions would actually be competing against each other in terms of funding, in terms of work, and yet the mission is the same. We are trying to change the status quo, change the system to have a better world. But the silo mentality is quite a challenge. But what I love about the People First community, and I wonder how this has been achieved so far, I do not see competition. I see partners. I see people who come together and say, storytelling is working for us in terms of impact. I see another partner talking about video documentation of the work they're doing, and they're ready to share that best practice for another institution to sort of emulate. That is the spirit I believe we should be embracing in the work we do. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Caren and Azad. Actually, you've laid a very good foundation to what I would say. I agree with you. Oftentimes, we don't really realize that change takes time, especially when you're talking about the results of leadership development, and measuring the impact is really, some people want just an impact right away. And this is something actually that is really supposed to take time. So thinking about the greatest challenges that Roshan was asking us about, I think I'm more inclined actually to go in the health sector where I work mostly. I think we have a serious issue of a mindset shift. Like creating a quality leadership program and investing in people is often labeled as expensive. And that's a problem. Yeah, of course, it takes a lot of coaching, a lot of convening, a lot of holistic support, and it takes a lot of exposure to network. So it takes a lot of time and money, but you can't expect most related results the next day. You can't measure it the next day. It's something that is really supposed to take time. And at the end of the day, not enough funders appreciate the importance of this kind of investment in health. Some would instead invest in medicines, in machines, in multiplying hospitals and clinics, like without envisioning how investing in very people at the helm of the health system is the best decision you can really take in the long run. The other issue related to the same non-progressive mindset I see is that oftentimes when discussing leadership development, like in the global health, many still think through a clinical lens. So there has to be a major mindset shift to think about what it actually takes to change health systems. Of course, we need doctors, and the community health workers, but what about people who know data and digital health? People with supply chain expertise, researchers, epidemiologists, people with communications and architecture skills. They are also critical perspectives to be at the decision-making table. So we can't possibly continue investing in the health sector in such a blind way and expect it to see different results. So we actually need to find ways to intentionally build up non-clinical professionals as leaders. So I really believe that transformational business or political governance would only exist where health and we also need to accept, as you know, my friends here, Caren and Azad, have said that it takes change. It takes that change will take time, and you can't just attempt to measure the impact the next day. Thank you.
Thank you, Shema. Maybe I'll just pop one other thought in, and I'm reminded as I listen to this litany of challenges and obstacles that our panel members also talked a lot about overcoming. So I do want to highlight, I believe overcoming is an aspect of this. But one of the things I was thinking about was models that are about putting people first are a lot about intentionality and execution. Really going into the work with a very strong vision for all the things, and then remembering that it's not just about planning, it is actually about in the doing. I felt like all the stories we shared at the beginning were a lot about that, but recognizing that often, and this is because people learn differently, people build community differently. It's different kinds of spaces in which people create shared agendas or understand together what shared impact might look like, or how over time communication around the work or around successes or around challenges will happen. But I both reflect on my own history there. We offer for folks in our grantee partner portfolio a list of resources that they can take advantage of each year. And people have said to me in the past, well, why don't you make it a menu where you get to pick a certain number of things a year? Or why don't you be more prescriptive? And I think our realization over time has been giving organizations and leaders and teams more optionality is always better, because some years are hard years, or some years are easy years. Some years are years of growth. And the word I use is some years are years of digesting, simply using that year to figure it out. But I do think allowing for intentionality and execution, helping people to have those very, in some ways, two different kinds of skills, that would be another piece that I think is both a challenge and a place where there's lots of solutions to be brought. And some of that is about patience, some of it is about high expectations, which can sometimes be intention. But I've appreciated, I feel like, Roshan, that we've given a nice big watershed of opportunities for figuring things out.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks, Anne-Marie and everyone. And I think that's what we're going to get to with the next question. But I also wanted to share, Vicky has a really nice comment in the chat there, and she talks about gatekeeping. And, one of the experiences or challenges I've found sometimes is around kind of that role of gatekeepers to prevent people from joining movements for change as well. And one recent example or a field in which I think this is quite prevalent is the field of climate change, which is like a very technocratic, science-based field. But we have the science, we have the policy. What we need is like more people joining and joining this movement. And that's something we're starting to work on at IREX, is how do we get more people just getting involved with climate change and getting past those sort of like technical or technocratic barriers as well. So let's move into possibility. So what's an example from each of your work that illustrates, the power and potential of putting people first? And again, we'll go with whoever wants to kick us off.
Even though I spoke first time, I'll jump in now. I have one very small example, and then I had one more fundamental one. But I wanted to share, and Shema has heard me say this before. I've been grateful to travel to a number of different places around the world for my work. And I can't tell you the number of times when I'm in community on a site and I recognize the number of people who have a history with Global Health Corps. It's the craziest thing. And I always am really struck by that organization being far enough into its history that it's not just begun to populate the more, if you will, junior levels of an organization, or the helper roles, or this is a couple years and then you have something else you need to do roles, but truly they are the leaders of those organizations. And that to me is an enormous success story. And I'm certain that there are lots of other talent pipelines that have created that kind of community, but it's quite profound. But the other story I wanted to share, about 5, 6, 7 years ago, Johnny Dorsey, who happened to be one of the 2 co-founders of Global Health Corps, and himself was a White House fellow, so he had the opportunity of being in a talent kind of opportunity. He and Barbara Bush had started Global Health Corps, but Johnny within Emerson Collective began to fund a group of organizations, all of whom ran fellowship in 4 models. They call themselves the Talent for Good cohort. We gathered them together several times a year. They did a lot of online, even before COVID, training and convening. And then about 3 or 4 years ago, that group said they didn't want to be under the aegis of a philanthropic organization anymore, which I thought was really important. And they've now become a standalone organization within Baltimore Core called Talent for Good. There's over 30 organizations in that cohort. They themselves do a lot of gathering, sharing, learning, best practices, identification. And to me, it was such a powerful thing when the leadership of that distributed group of organizations, who admittedly have somewhat different missions and do their work in somewhat different ways, saw the power in having their own agency and being in a cohort of cohorts. And so to me, that was one of those other moments where I thought, these talent models, I mean, people may say sometimes this is expensive or this is hard or who is included, and we need to keep pushing the question, who is included? But it has been very powerful, I think, to see a network like Talent for Good really find its own center and then really own that stream of work in a way that is most responsive to the organizations within it.
I'm happy to pick up. Oh, go ahead, Shema.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So thank you so much, Anne-Marie, to speak about actually the power of the Global Health Network. And it has really arisen to be very powerful because we don't have just this fellowship program and feel satisfied with it. It's actually a way, like the fellowship serves as an entry level to a wider community of like-minded leaders who are going to be supporting each other, not only as they rise into their careers, but as actually they see systemic changes, issues in the health sector, and they want to collectively work to tackle them. So, like in Rwanda, where I'm based, we have a community that is like close to 130 people who have gone through Global Health Corps. And actually, what I'm even saying, they have never left Global Health Corps, but they are really supporting each other in each and everything. they're really discussing about the situations and how they could be to tackle them. I've seen them, like especially the ones that are leading, you know, their social enterprises they founded, or some that are leading other international organizations in the country. When COVID hit, and they had this very big problem of whether they should be downsizing their staff or whatever, they have actually to come together and think about like a collective solution or just the kind of resources they can tap into to ensure that the very people spend the time recruiting, training, like they don't really lose them. But maybe just talking about their collective work, in the interest of time, I can give one example. One of the gaps that our alums have really identified in the country has been a number of laws that are limiting adolescents that are not yet 18 years of age to access sexually reproductive health services in the country. Or that actually we had a human reproductive law that didn't have actually things that a 21st century person should consider as basics, like that law doesn't have anything related to assisted reproduction, for example. It doesn't have anything related to safe abortion. So the Ministry of Health, knowing how you know, the convening power of global health alums, and many actually they are powerhouse as a willing think tank, they actually partnered with them on a project to change the laws related to sexual and reproductive health and rights. The alums project have already commissioned that study, and now actually the study has overhauled all the Rwandan laws, policies, and any legal frameworks out there. So it's a very comprehensive study, and it's going to be published soon. And it's really expected to hugely inform the upcoming efforts to reform the health sector law. So this is really a great example of alums working in different organizations, sometimes in different sectors and levels, but really working together to bring about change. And they know they can really indeed make it. Thank you.
Caren, do you want to go?
Yeah, Caren.
Yes. Yes, Azad, I can go. I'll share two possibilities I have seen with a program with government and program with civil society and young people at the community level. So let me start with government. Our fellowship with the governments of Kenya, Ghana, Liberia are very experiential in nature. And what we try to do is we try to give them firsthand experience of what citizens go through when they go to government offices seeking for government services. And so that entails them sort of being actual citizens and disguising themselves not as government officials, but as citizens, and going to different government offices, be it the postal office, hospitals, learning institutions, to seek service, and then get to experience firsthand what citizens go through. And then when we come together, we get to review. How did you feel? What did you think about that? What did you like? What didn't you like? What do we need to do differently as public servants to make sure that we are having effective service delivery to members of the public? That has really been interesting because a few years back, for instance, in Kenya, through an initiative of some members of the public and a leader within the government system, they came up with something called Huduma Centers, which is a one-stop shop for all government services in Kenya. I feel like that has been so transformative, because initially, for instance, young people and other members of the public would go to a government office. Let's say they want to start a business. You need one permit, you need this, you need something else. And they are all decentralized in different parts of the city or government. Then it makes it really difficult, and it takes long before things can happen. So now that we have this one-stop shop, oh my goodness, service delivery has improved in such a big way. And that's just one example of, for instance, when government puts citizens at the center of the work they do. So our program is citizen-centric. So part of a larger part of the fellowship is to make sure that government officials get to put citizens at the center of the work they do. Something else I want to share, but now on the side of Emerging Leaders Foundation, is that we operate in 13 counties out of 47 counties in Kenya. And we work with young people within communities, trying to make sure they have better agency, they can be seen, they can be heard, they speak up through social media, writing articles, going to parliament, and all those spaces to make their voices heard and to contribute to national development. But then we realized we could not go to every part of the country to do that. And we needed to create more leaders and not create followers. And so what we did was start a program called Tunaweza, which is Swahili for We Can, to train trainers and pass on the skills so that young people, wherever they are, they can nurture more leaders and create more leaders and own their own change. And so that has moved from us as an organization to the young people and to the community, because then again, they know best what needs to change and how that change needs to happen. And so that is also just another example of something that I feel is working really well, simply because we decided to create more leaders and give them the charge to lead change where they are. Thank you. Azad, over to you.
I think we've all gone, right?
No, Azad.
No, I'll be quick, Roshan. Right. I know you're running up on time pressure. First, I just wanted to say, Anne-Marie, just in the same way you see Global Health Corps around the world, I have to give a shout out to the Teach for All network, because everywhere we go in the education space, we see people who've been through that network, who've had such seminal experiences through that network. And it's really remarkable to see that. I think in terms of highlighting sort of the impact of leaders, one thing that we saw, and I would just go back to the early days of COVID for this, because, what we saw in the education space was that schools were shut very abruptly, and then there were all these directives coming from governments as to how the education system should work. But there was very little, in most cases, the school leaders were the only ones left in the school, because, students were staying at home, most teachers were staying at home as well, and the leaders had to figure out how to keep this thing operational. And what we found was that because they didn't have training, they didn't really have a sense of how to go about what they were being told to do. So it was quite interesting with very minimal support in terms of some basic guidance in terms of how to run an online school, for instance. How do you set up an online schedule for your school? How do you check in with kids about their mental health during these times, about their family's health, things like this, like very basic things. We were able to actually equip school leaders with the tools to be able to actually go out and run these schools, and that made a big difference. And so just the idea that one person in the community who's equipped to make to sort of keep things going can actually keep things going was quite revelatory for us. So yeah, let me stop there.
Thank you all. I think it's so important, like we often focus on challenges to also celebrate progress, possibility, success as well. So thank you for sharing those stories. I think we're going to try to move to questions. We have one from Kende. Kende, would you like to come online and ask it? I can also read it out.
Yeah, sure. I can ask it. Hello, everyone. I'm Kende with the Open Government Partnership. And yeah, so one question, it really resonated with me that, we want to invest in the people, right? The people behind the people behind our programs, and make sure that we can see the sort of like long-term vision on our end. Like we know why we're doing what we're doing, the importance of it. At the same time, we still have, you know, the other side of it, where is that we need to show the results to funders. We need to show that when we can impact. And as you said, like this impact can't be necessarily shown in the next 5 months, the next year or so. Sometimes we do need to play the long game. So how do you reconcile that within your organizations, within your programs? How do you reconcile that you do need to some extent show that there are some positive outcomes happening, but then it might not be necessarily what you're striving for, right? You know, like that's long-term impact. It might not be what you're striving for. So yeah, does anyone, I don't really have anyone I'm asking in particular, just sort of an open question.
Maybe I can just speak. Go ahead, Anne-Marie, please.
No, you go first, Azad.
No, I was just going to say that, you know, I think what we've done is, and of course, this is also with the benefit of a few years of experience and you know, to be able to share the long-term vision. I mean, obviously, this is in relation to the funder conversation, but to be able to share the long-term vision and then not overpromise what you're going to do in the next year or two, because what we find, like when we start to overpromise, that's when we get into all sorts of problems. But if you can say, look, you know, we have this 7-year vision or 10-year vision, and this is how it's going to play out, and this is how we're going to measure, and then in the next year or two, this is what we can do. And we can get to outputs, maybe we can get some outcomes, we're not going to get to impact, but having those frank conversations, I think really helps.
And the one observation I was going to make as a person who is the recipient of a lot of these kinds of input and talking to other peer funders over time is I feel like, and Azad intimated this, I feel like starting just by asking about inputs and outputs is actually really valuable, because I think what you're also trying to do is help people to have, I'll call it a metacognition of this. So when you describe, we had this many placements and this many trainings and programs that looked like this and people that took on work that looks like this, what you're beginning to help people see is what the path to leadership and the path to change looks like. Because often, going back to that piece around execution and intentionality as part of transformation, most people, I don't think, see the world in such detail and complexity. And so I think by starting with inputs and outputs, but I think there's also places like next steps when people complete, and of course, Shema would say you never complete a leadership program, you just move into alumni status and continue to give. But when you complete whatever that formal piece of the work is, what is your next step? Where does your time and energy of the people that you work with, where does it go next? And what does that tell you about what's happening and what could happen next? Or how does that group of people begin to collaborate, or the networks they're in begin to collaborate? And what does that tell you that might happen next? So I feel like you almost have the little, you have a pond, and then there's little pebbles that go in the pond, and you watch the ripples and you story tell about the ripples. And then you help people to understand it's in watching the ripples what the possibility is. And in some ways, other people might not understand that unless you truly unpack it for them. And you help them to see what you see through what is actually happening that they can see too. I hope that wasn't too overly non-specific, but I think actually you know things that you have to help them to know.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm going to try to move to the next question just because we're running up on time. And also this comes from Bruna from Lehman Foundation, who's a long-term champion of the People First community. So Bruna, would you like to ask your question?
Hi, everyone. I'll be quick, so we have time to hear some answers. I would love to know a bit about how can investing in collective leadership development contribute to scale up impact?
I can go first. Collectively, thank you, Bruna, for the question, collective leadership development versus scale and impact. Now, I do believe scale is important. Numbers are critical. But again, when you look at collective leadership development, it sort of takes you away from mere numbers to real transformation and real impact. I have seen that, and I think that's actually a better way of going about it. But the challenge then for institutions and organizations is, how do organizations remain mission-driven to stay true to the cause and to the vision their own, and not necessarily be driven by donors and by funding? Hence the question of even financial sustainability, institutional sustainability for organizations then coming in. So then when institutions are sustainable in terms of finances, capacity, strength of the institution, I see that they tend to be more mission driven, and transformation is again more sustainable there than when it comes to institutions that are merely driven by donor funding and funding that is available, because then you will keep shifting goalposts to get the money to then be able to do the work. So collective leadership development, I see it comes with real transformation and real impact. Hence again, the institutional sustainability. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to chime in?
Yes, just a small contribution I wanted to bring to a fantastic answer from Caren, is that from just what we've seen at Global Health Core, when you have a leadership development program that has been successful, actually one of the indicators is like how many organizations, how many alums want to emulate it and come up with more leadership development organizations in their own way. And like at Global Health Core, for example, in Rwanda alone, I know 2 organizations that are creating their own fellowship program, actually leveraging the expertise of our alums. One of them is a great university that Anne-Marie knows very well. And they can actually take some different forms, but they really matter anyway. For example, one of fellowship I'm talking about that originated from Global Health Core, it's a fellowship for young architecture, doing actually the social good, especially building things like the state-of-art hospitals that are going to be, preventing the flow of germs in the health space. And that's why actually for us, we are limited to certain countries. The person doing it, supported by a generation of other architects that came from Global Health Core, they're actually scaling it up to entire Africa. So I think there is all those ripple effects that come from leadership development programs. And that's why actually instead of having one leadership program and want actually to inflate it so that I can refit everywhere, maybe one of way of making it, of scaling it up, it's actually making it successful so that others actually, can take the torch and march with it. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much for those answers, Shema and Caren. So we're out of time. I want to firstly just say thank you everyone for joining. And if you'd like to continue the conversation around the role of putting people first, please sign up to become a member of the People First community. Brittany is going to, yep, she's already done it, put a link there. So please check that out and sign up. And our next session is starting in about 5 minutes. It's a fan session led by Grace and Phil. And the only last thing to do is to thank our wonderful panel, two of whom woke up at before 6 in the morning to be here with us, and two of whom are doing it at the end of their day. So we really appreciate your commitment to this conversation and to this work. Thank you for sharing your learnings, your insights, your wisdom with all of us. So thank you to the panel, and thank you all of you for joining, and we look forward to the next session. Take care.